So, with this, over the next 5 or 6 years, and these various experiences that I was having and research I was doing, along with Dr. Langham, what I attempted to do was put a language to these 13 principles and to explore where they fit in. And I came across something. I was reading a lot about quantum theory and the various 19th century scientists that were discovering relativity and uncertainty principle and various new and exciting scientific theories of the universe, other worlds theory, things of that nature. Schrodinger's cat, all kinds of really wild, way out there theories of the universe that have held true to today. And there was one scientific process that I became quite infatuated with called general systems sciences. General systems sciences is very interesting in that it has to do with cybernetics. It was the forerunner of the computer, the concept of the computer, back in 1927. It was developed by a man by the name of von Bertalanffy. And what general system sciences does is it takes principles of biology and the natural sciences, chemistry, even mathematics, and it uses those principles as operative functions for human interaction. In other words, human behavior relates to these principles of other sciences, and it's called cross-disciplining, which has become very, very popular today. In fact, there's a educational process that the Star Wars director has embraced, and so what Daryl and I did, was we took these principles and we researched as to what sort of names we could give them that relate to philosophy and science at the same time. And of course, we emphasized science first and then went to the philosophy. And the science that we found was very interesting. The first that we found was we examined the work of Pythagoras, who was a 3rd century BC philosopher and scientist, mathematician, very, very famous mathematician. And he was the founder of the a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And that was his science, which correlated to what we were discovering with the cellular geometry. However, more importantly, his philosophy was that what he would say is that A plus B equals C. Awareness plus beliefs always equal expression or character or characterization. And we experimented with that, and what we did was I eventually came up with a set of cubes of these 13, because my wife said, nobody's understanding what you're talking about. At one point I had a whole room full of psychologists and sciences at my house. And I started off talking to them, and there was like 16 of them in the room. And I was trying to explain to them all of these discoveries. And after about 20 minutes, we said, okay, let's take a break here. And they said to me, I said, well, what do you think so far? And to a man, they all said, Robert, we know that you're onto something, but we haven't got a clue as to what you're talking about. And they weren't alone because while I had a deeper understanding than they did, I didn't have an overall understanding. So my wife said to me, look, you need something physical that people can see and they could relate to. Make something. So I did. I made what I now call the awareness cubes. Okay? And I'm going to show you and I'm going to explain the science of what we discovered by virtue of these cubes. There are 13 cubes, and they break out into 3 different groups, as Dr. Langham had indicated in his theory, and as we were finding throughout the various sites and scriptures. There's the creative group, which has 3 principles. There's the organizational, which has 6 principles. And there's the functional, which has 4, okay? Comprising the 13. Now, the key that I discovered is this little cube here. And I'm going to explain this to you, and I hope that you have an objective mind for what I'm going to tell you. The white cube represents potential. Why potential? Because potential embraces everything. Anything and everything that you could think of and you can't think of involves potential. It's either realized potential or unrealized potential. That's a pretty wide scope of thought. It's almost like God. It's everything. Potential is omniscient. It's all powerful. It's all present, all knowing, the whole thing. So we have potential, and you notice it's in a cube form because that's what most of these ancient philosophers and mathematicians, as well as Dr. Darrell Langham, with his concept, claimed that this is the master cube of the universe. This is how the universe is built. So the cube, the potential cube, has 3 parts to it. It has the yellow, as you see here. On one side is a yellow positive, and on the opposing side, face, is the creative negative. Same thing with the organizational. One side has a positive organizational, the other side has a negative. And finally, the functional. One side has the positive functional, and the other side has the negative function. So what do we have here? Well, biblically speaking, we have the everything, the all-encompassing, with six sides, such as the 6 days of creation. And then those 6 have 3 parts to them. They have the creative, the organizational, and the functional. And they have a negative and a positive to them. So there's a duality. So we have polarity, we have potential, and we have 3 parts. So we have the 3 parts in one. We have what we believe was a theory of creation. And that theory of creation carried into human intelligence, human behavior. And we then started to give titles to the 13. As I said, with Pythagoras, we utilized the A plus B equals C. Awareness plus belief equals communication or expression. All right. We then found with not only the ancient Greeks, but the ancient Chinese, the Asian, and also the Hebrew philosophies, that the functional concepts were four. There's only four ways in which you can function: physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually or intuitively. And I'm going to talk more about this spiritual stuff later on. So we adapted those concepts for the functional. The organizational, what we did was we used principles of biology, what might be known as microbial intelligence, and we labeled each of the organizational cubes, and those related to rules or laws, order, parts and whole, measurement, and also feedback. So those were our six organizational. We then started to utilize them in experiments. For instance, I was doing a show and seminar in Denver, and I had a booth there, and I was showing people how this worked and giving them some meaning. And this physicist came to me, and he said, this is very interesting. He says, if what you're saying is true, he says, there is a way to experiment. I said, yeah. He says, roll them. Use them randomly and see what happens. I said, you mean like take an issue and then do divination or something like that? He said, yeah, sure. He says, if what you're saying is true, he says, one of them is going to come up. We did it. And that was the start. It worked. In every single utilization of the concept since then, and that was approximately 1985, it's worked. 30 years. I've maybe once or twice, and that was because the subject was not pure, in the sense of they had problems. But I have stacks of papers of questionnaires and whatnot, and the results. And all we did was we just took the whole thing and took an issue and just dumped it out, and then started interpreting what all of these things meant relative to the issue. And it like in seconds, in some cases maybe minutes, the answer came up. So the physicist was absolutely right. He knew what he was talking about. And it was a magnificent insight as to the validity of the theory. And then we went into the philosophy.